She recognized a kindred spirit in Columbus and determined to support him in his voyage as soon as her great war to complete the reconquest of Spain from the alien Moors by the conquest of Granada had been victoriously concluded. Now, that turned out to take many years, and Columbus was distressed at having to wait so long. He had to wait, as a matter of fact, for over 5 years before the war was finally completed and Isabel was ready to help him. Granada surrendered in January of 1492, and within a month, the decision was made to approve Columbus's expedition and to give him 3 ships with which to make it. As everyone knows, those 3 ships were the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. The Santa Maria was the largest of the 3, and the other 2, the Nina and the Pinta, were of a type of ship called caravels that Prince Henry the Navigator of Portugal had developed particularly for the exploration of previously unknown coasts, an extremely dangerous undertaking. They were ideally adapted for that purpose. They were small and handy with shallow draft, did not carry a large crew, so you didn't have to carry a lot of food, and they were just what Columbus needed. So with those 3 ships, he set out across the Atlantic on his history-making voyage in 1492, going just as he had always planned, down here to the region of the trade winds, and then across. If he kept going straight, he would have ended up in Florida, but he saw a number of flocks of birds flying, land birds, when he reached this point, so he turned to the southwest and reached the Bahama Islands. The exact location of his landfall has long been disputed. It was for some years thought to be an island called Watling's Island. There is now very strong evidence that it was another island in the Bahama chain called Samana Key. He reached land there and then proceeded to explore nearby areas, the part of the island of Cuba and the island on which Haiti and the Dominican Republic are now located, an island which he named and long was known as Hispaniola, island here. So he explored these 2 large islands, and in the course of his explorations, his largest ship, the Santa Maria, was wrecked due to the inattention of its crew while Columbus was asleep. And the ship and much of its crew had to be left on Hispaniola. The captain of the Pinta deserted him, and he was left with only his smallest ship, the Nina. And in that ship, he made his return, sailing to the north and returning before the prevailing westerlies across this part of the Atlantic. Very stormy in winter. He crossed it in February of 1493 with tremendous difficulty and danger, a series of storms, several of which seemed about to wreck his ship. At one point, believing the ship might not survive more than the next few hours, he wrote up an account of his tremendous discovery, the greatest in history, which, if his ship was lost, would go down with that ship and its men. He wrote an account of it, put it in a barrel, and put it overboard with the hopes that it would be found even if he did not survive. Well, he survived. The barrel didn't. The barrel never was located. Columbus survived this storm then and stopped at the Azores Islands belonging to Portugal, here where he picked up some water and was able to rest his men briefly. Then went on to Portugal, toward Spain actually, intended to reach Spain, but a new series of storms struck him, and he was finally very close to the Portuguese coast, arrived there in the middle of the night in a tremendous storm, and had only 1 sail left, and with that sail he had to tack to sail partly against the wind to avoid being driven ashore against the cliff, which would have destroyed his ship and all his men at the very end of the voyage. He made the turn successfully, landed in Lisbon in Portugal, and was well treated by the King of Portugal despite his earlier rejection of him, and then went on to Spain. This was the great discovery voyage of Columbus, and it created an immediate sensation throughout Europe, and within a few months he was given more than 20 ships for a second voyage, which established a permanent colony on the island of Hispaniola here. And this colony was in contact, of course, with the local Indians, and there were many problems resulting from that, and much ill treatment of the Indians by the Spanish. Columbus proved to be not a good civil administrator. He was not interested in that sort of thing. He was not very effective at it, partly because he was a foreigner. He was an Italian, a Genoese, remember, and then he spent many years in Portugal. The Spanish didn't like foreigners. They did not take readily to orders from a foreigner to leadership by him. It was fine when Columbus was at sea, where he really knew his business, but on land, he found it very difficult to get people to obey him. So he was not a success as a civil administrator. Much of the abuse of the Indians that did occur on Hispaniola was done against his orders and by people who were rejecting his authority, not just in that way, but in every way. Columbus always preferred to sail away and try to make new discoveries, and when things got really difficult on Hispaniola, that's what he would do. He'd be absent for long periods, and the situation would get worse. Columbus was a discoverer, an explorer, the greatest seaman of his age, and perhaps of any age, and that was his great talent and ability, not anything else. He did, however, consent to the enslavement of some of the Indians, and when those Indians were sent to Spain, they were immediately released by the great Queen Isabel with the statement, "Who authorized my admiral to dispose of my subjects in this manner?" Because the great and good Queen Isabel always regarded all of her subjects, including the Indians of the newly discovered territories, as having the same rights as the people in Spain itself. So the second voyage of Columbus was not particularly successful, although it did lead to more discoveries in the Caribbean, the exploration of most of Cuba, and the discovery of most of the islands in the Antilles down through here. Coming back to Spain after this difficult voyage and all the troubles in Hispaniola, Columbus found that Isabel was unhappy with his record as a civil administrator, but still enormously admired his achievements as a navigator and was willing to support him in a third voyage, which took place in 1497 when Columbus set out for, once again, on a somewhat southward course and reached the mainland of South America here in what is now Venezuela. This was the first time that Columbus had reached the American mainland. Up to this point, all of his discoveries had been islands, and now he reached the mainland. He realized that there was a continent there. He still thought, however, that this continent was a part of Asia, as then the islands he discovered were lying off the coast of Asia. It does not appear that he ever realized that Asia was still very far away to the westward, although it seems like he must have begun to suspect that at the time of his fourth voyage. He did realize that there was a long way to go to get to the known parts of Asia, to China and Japan. But he certainly realized that vast new territories had been discovered and that a new world indeed had been opened up, especially after touching on the continent in his third voyage. After completing his explorations in that voyage along the northern coast of South America, he went back to Hispaniola, where Isabel had sent a new governor, and this new governor named Bobadilla was very hostile to Columbus, put him in chains, and sent him back to Spain. This is the famous episode when he arrived in Spain, Isabel was horrified that he had been so treated and immediately released him with many apologies. Certainly never been her intention to punish the man, however inadequate as a civil administrator who had made such great discoveries for Spain. Columbus's fourth and final voyage was taken to try to find a way through the land mass that he now knew existed to reach Asia, which he still believed was not too far away. So he sailed along the coast of Central America from around Honduras down to Panama, looking for a strait, looking for a way through. Of course, there is none, and it does not appear that Columbus ever found out that another vast ocean lay just a few score miles, so less than 100 miles, across the narrow Isthmus of Panama. But he was searching for a way through to Asia still. That fourth and last voyage of Columbus was from 1502 to 1504.